Coming up on Theater Talk.
I think it's serendipitous that this moment has arrived and Finian's Rainbow is here when we have a black president and we have financial issues abound, and it's ultimately a show about, you know, hope.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
Daniel Craig and Hugh Jackman have just opened on Broadway in a new play called A Steady Rain, but the critics have been a little cool to the play. Here to discuss it, two critic friends of ours, Jacques Lesourd of CBS Radio. Welcome to Theater Talk, Jacques.
Thank you.
And Mike Kuchwara from the Associated Press.
Welcome.
All right, this was eagerly anticipated event. Daniel Craig and Hugh Jackman opening in a play that had something like a $12 million advance. But you guys seem to be sort of disappointed in this damp squib of a play, Mike.
It's kind of a mousy little drama, and it's mostly monologues, which I think is one reason why the critics were so disappointed. There's really not much interaction between the two gentlemen on stage, but I have to give them credit. They are on stage for a full 90 minutes, so people, I think, they're getting their $130.
Except they're not taking their clothes off, which is what people seem to
even. Are they rolling up their sleeves? I don't think
Yes,
they are.
they
take their jackets off.
They
They
have
take their
lovely
jackets
Well,
off.
Hugh Jackman is the darling of Broadway, so everybody wants to see him. But I think the nice surprise in this production is Daniel Craig, who doesn't have much New York experience, have any New York experience on a stage. And he really comes across the stronger, the more well-rounded character. And his is an interesting performance. I think there's no arguing that they're interesting performances, but very minimally packaged. The set by Scott Pask is sort of good, as a matter of fact. But I think anybody who goes should diminish their expectations and be prepared to admire some acting.
I mean, what is this play about? What's going on?
It's about the relationship between two Chicago policemen, a good cop and a bad cop, and how an incident that they both cover sort of affects their lives. There's a lot of plot, put into these 90 minutes. In fact, way too much plot. It's sort of like several episodes of Law and Order all strung together and kind of mixed up into one big unappetizing stew.
And a lot of it is recycled, such as the Jeffrey Dahmer story.
Oh, yes.
Totally
Yes,
recycled.
Did they bring in Jeffrey Dahmer?
No.
It's a sort of an incident that's sort of like the Jeffrey Dahmer case, which happened in Milwaukee. It's been transferred to Chicago, and it's an incident that's similar to the Jeffrey Dahmer case.
But everyone will recognize
it as the Jeffrey Dahmer case.
And they're both doing Chicago accents.
Yes. Well, Craig doing it better than Mr. Jackman.
When they both started, it reminded me of Saturday Night Live, George Wednesday, the Bears, but then you got more used to it. But you're right, Jackman went in and out of the Chicago accent, yet it was quite amazing that they could do that at all. You couldn't see two American actors pulling off such a sort of regional Cockney thing.
But I have a friend who admires, who likes them both for their foreign accents, the British and the Australian. And she went, all excited, and they were doing these Chicago accents, and she was really disappointed.
With their clothes on.
Yeah. One of the problems for Jackman is that he's such a likable performer. And
he's the bad cop.
And he has to play the bad cop. So it's a real stretch for him when he doesn't quite succeed.
They certainly weren't those characters. And Daniel Craig is such a gorgeous man.
He plays mousy.
Well,
he is very hard to see
I wish
Bond.
I had thought, I can't take credit for this, but several of the critics said he looked like a 1970s porn star.
Yes,
which he did with the
handlebar
mustache.
Yes.
And he looks terrific. And he has this kind of defeated quality in the plays. And he's terrific in it, actually. I think he is the real revelation of this production, I think.
Yeah, it was sort of the Hugh Jackman show, Hugh bringing Daniel Craig along, but Daniel Craig has emerged with slightly better reviews, I think.
But I think you should have dinner after the show, because I hear that people who have dinner first fall asleep because the lighting is very dim. It's these two actors, and there's not much
the question
excitement.
I have, there's been a lot of talk in the press that Daniel Craig and Hugh Jackman have both been annoyed that cell phones have been going off and they've stopped the show to yell at people. I wonder if they'll stop the show to yell at people when they're yawning.
Or
they
sleeping,
may.
or snoring.
They may.
Well,
Snoring.
but for all of it, and even though there were moments where I didn't think that they were inhabiting the characters that well, still here were these two gorgeous, wonderful performers on the stage before me, and I was completely captivated by it, and really just felt I was lucky to see those two working
But their
together.
gorgeousness is definitely subdued. I mean, there's no playing up of their gorgeousness.
Well, chacun a son goût.
Well,
Jacques
perhaps.
Cousteau. I like those Chicago
But you know, it
accents.
won't matter what we say. The show is sold out for its run, and they can charge whatever.
Well, we should say the premium price tickets are going for something like $350
or more for a
So
certain
what is for an
performances.
85-minute play?
That's correct. And the gross is over $1 million a week. I mean, they're setting house records, but it's kind of easy to set a house record if your premium prices are like $350 and your regular price is $130, and then going up to $140 for the last week of the run.
I don't know. Sounds like an underwhelming star
It
vehicle
is
to
not
me.
a must-see for the beginning of the season.
But there is one that you like very much that's sort of surprising to us.
The Royal Family, which I was delighted by.
A revival of the old George S. Kaufman, Edna Ferber play that's basically like the Barrymore acting
It's
plan.
the Barrymore family, and it's the classic, you know, backstage. But when actors backstage had a glamour about them, and it has a marvelous cast. I saw the not the original production in 1926, but the 1975. It was my first year of reviewing,
Which was taped, and you can see on PBS from time to
yes,
time.
and Eva Le Gallienne was the star, and Rosemary Harris was in it, and now Jan Maxwell is playing the Rosemary Harris role, and Rosemary Harris is the Eva Le Gallienne person. Directed by Doug Hughes, who directed Doubt. It is flawless. I mean, not exactly flawless, because there are a few duds in some of the minor roles for which are surprising. But Reg Rogers, I've never seen him do this sort of over-the-top John Barrymore thing. It's great fun. It's 3 acts, but it's marvelous fun. It's a season opener that gives us all a booster shot of love for the theater people.
I'm starved. I haven't had a bite for 12 hours. Bring me everything you've got. But first, I've got to have a hot bath. Come on upstairs, everybody, when I take a bath.
John Glover is in it. Jan Maxwell is over the top, but she's always, and she's been in so many imperiled productions. I'm glad she's finally in a winning production.
When the season is over, I think Steady Rain is not going to be remembered. No. It'll be remembered for the fact that these 2 megastars came to Broadway. But people are going to remember things like The Royal Family. They're going to remember Superior Donuts, which is Tracy Lett's a new play from Chicago. A terrific cast with Michael McKean.
Okay. The test is name 10 black poets.
10?
Yup.
That's not a racist test, that's a poet test.
I'll even throw in Langston, all right? He could be number 1. Go. 10 poets. If you say Nipsey Russell, the game is over.
And I think what Superior Donuts has that Steady Rain doesn't have are characters you can really care about. You're rooting for these 2 guys, an aging white owner of a rundown donut shop in Chicago, and this brash young, black kid who comes in to try to help him save the business. They're terrific characters, and the whole Steppenwolf cast is superb. They brought everybody from Chicago. And talk about Chicago accents. Yeah. This cast has got it nailed.
You're like a after-school special. Do you hear yourself?
Is that bad advice? Stay in school. Is that wrong?
Yeah, well, what is this? Are you captain of the Starship now? Captain what's his?
So basically here, you can skip A Steady Rain, and you should see The Royal Family and the Tracy Letts play Superior Donuts.
Definitely.
All right. Jacques Lesourd from CBS Radio, Mike Kuchwara from the Associated Press. Thanks for being our guests tonight. And you guys are replacing Craig and Jackman in Steady Rain.
Yes, and I suggested Mike and I could come and do the show.
We're doing the bus and truck tour.
Let me hear your Chicago accents, boys.
Yeah.
Something in your eyes I see soon begins bewitching me. It's that old devil that you stole from the skies. It's that old devil in your eyes.
It's a big year for the lyricist Yip Harburg. He would be 113 now if he were alive, but his career is having a comeback. Last month, we celebrated the 70th anniversary of The Wizard of Oz, for which he wrote the lyrics. And right now, they're mounting a revival of his most successful Broadway musical, Finian's Rainbow.
And we are joined by Arthur Perlman, who has adapted the book to this new production of Finian's Rainbow, about to open at the St. James. Welcome to Theater Talk, Arthur. And we're very pleased to have back on the show the lyricist Michael Korie, who was here a few months ago talking about the lyrics of Oscar Hammerstein. He has written the musicals Grey Gardens and is working on Finding Neverland about J.M. Barrie. Welcome back to Theater Talk.
Good to be back.
Okay, Arthur, Finian's Rainbow has always been considered one of the great musicals of all time. Certainly has one of the greatest scores, really. But there's always been this problem of reviving it because of the subject matter dealing with race. And we should say that in the show there's a racist Southern senator who, through a lightning strike, is converted into a black man. And this was cutting and daring edge, cutting and daring at the time in 1947, but has been considered kind of patronizing and almost racist today. Have you solved that problem in this show?
Of course.
And how did you do it?
Well, for one thing, we have two different actors playing the two different parts. Originally, when the senator is turned black by magical means, he falls to the ground and is putting blackface on. And he rises up and he's a white man in blackface. And that, of course, wouldn't fly these days. But by having two different actors, one white and one black, play the role, the one role, I think it adds layers that make the piece work much better. The black actor, as we are doing it now, the change happens instantaneously, and we have a black actor, and he doesn't even know, of course, that he's black. So he's playing this white racist senator. In the second act, when he finds his voice, we have him in the song The Begat. He just takes over the song, and it becomes a celebration of this new person he's become.
Michael, how controversial was this in its day, this stage of magic of transforming the racist white Southern senator into a black man?
I think in its day, he got the blend of politics and humor and whimsy and charm right. And I think they thought it was hilarious in its day. But that was many years ago. It has been difficult to revive. I don't remember how they dealt with it in the movie version, which Francis Ford Coppola did.
And which was not by any means successful.
I think that, no, they haven't been able to deal with it. But in its day, it was considered hilarious. But I did go back and read some of the original reviews, and they noted that they felt there was a hint of vulgarity. That might have been their euphemism for it.
What do you think they meant by vulgarity?
I'm not sure. It could have meant anything because they weren't saying what they thought. There were sexual innuendos in the piece too. I think at one point that old lyricist technique of using a naughty word and describing it. He rhymes class with ass, and then he adds the ter for aster, or something like that. Those kind of things.
And of course, the aster, and of course he sings "When I'm Not Near the Girl That I Love," which was much more salacious in those days.
Well,
the
that is the perfect
infidelity.
That is the perfect excuse for the male libido. Still,
I love that song.
It's a wonderful song, and it's very sexual. And I think there's a version of the record where Harburg sings it himself, and you know that leprechaun is him.
He was always a champion of left-wing social causes from the beginning of his career as a lyricist, when he wrote "Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime," which was so wonderful. And then at the time he wrote Finian's Rainbow, is it not correct, Michael, he was blacklisted?
Well, he was certainly about to be blacklisted if it wasn't then.
Well, it was 47. It would have been
right, but McCarthyism was just coming in, and he wrote his next show in the height of it when he wasn't allowed to work in Hollywood anymore, and that was Flahui, and that was 51. It was a very bitter, dark show. Finian was lighthearted, even though he got in all of his darts against the establishment. I think he got the balance right, and the way I think he did it was by being a master lyricist and helping the composer write hit after hit after hit.
Yeah.
Finian's Rainbow has what? How many would we say
Standards.
classic songs, standards now?
I think it must be
How
like
Are Things in Glockamora? That Old Devil Moon.
Look to the Rainbow.
Yep.
When I'm Not Near the Girl I Love.
Yeah.
Wasn't this the first integrated
Yes.
chorus
Yes.
on Broadway? So now we say, these racial elements seemed a little dated until you've changed it to become appropriate. But at the time it was terribly liberal because he was integrating the chorus, which alas hadn't been done until that.
Yeah, oh, by the way, I don't think I've changed it. I think I brought out what is there and made it something that we can relate to a little bit more. But part of that is tying in the race and the economic values that he talks about. Because Yip always felt, and I think we feel today, most of us, that those are not separate, that they're interrelated.
This musical certainly is appropriate for our economic times, isn't it? That it's dealing with credit and
finding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yes.
And stealing it. But,
That's
I don't
Yip's
know.
impish little...
And the whole idea of when the idle poor become the idle rich. I think it was, you've studied his papers, and I have not. I only look at his work from a lyricist's point of view. But it seems to me that aside from The Wizard of Oz, almost everything else was that he was trying to blend his personal politics, which he felt strongly about, bring what he felt was true to the stage, with his sense of whimsy and delight and entertainment. It was in Bloomer Girl, which was about feminism. It was in, of course, Finian. It was in the next one, Flahui, which was a screed against capitalism. The happiest girl in the world was Sexual Politics, Lisa Strada, and on and on. But in Finian, the entertainment was in the right proportion. And he also was an innovator in Finian in the lyrics.
For example?
Well, if you look at his earlier work, like Bloomer Girl, he was still very much in the spell of Gilbert and Sullivan. He apparently grew up on the Lower East Side with the Gershwins, was good friends with Ira, and together they loved G&S, as it's called. And most people know of it as Pinafore and Pirates, which don't seem political. But the real G&S people love the one called Iolanthe, which is about the fairies get angry at the House of Lords and decide to take over Parliament. And it's filled with politics, and it came from W.S. Gilbert's feeling that he could blend that whimsy with politics and really give it to the establishment. And it ended up with the House of Lords having to be elected by competitive examination instead of by birthright. And I'm sure that both Ira and Yip were intimately acquainted with that because I see references to it throughout the work. And the kind of rhymes that Yip played with, where he made up words and added an ish, or
something sort of grandish,
or would leave off a syllable, like my circumstance, or and it was just so delightful that the ear is pulled in and has to listen to what's coming next and how he's going to get back to the hook. The hook is the title of every song, and he has hooks galore in Finian. And the way he stresses them, what he did structurally that was so interesting is the usual forms of songwriting are AABA, or ABAC, a big Irving Berlin favorite, or verse-chorus, which is what most rock and roll is, verse-chorus. And that's a way...
Meaning you start the...
You give an introductory statement and then you bang into the
big hit tune that is going to make
the song. That's
right,
and that's got the title in it, and then you hear a little bit more of preamble and you get the big thing. That's the chorus, that's verse-chorus. In theater, verse means something else traditionally. Verse means introduction. And then you sing AABA. And your A, somewhere in that A is your hook. Your B goes off into dreamland, and your final A comes back to the hook. Well, he came up with new forms in Finian's Rainbow. He came up with ABA. He came up with AAA. BB, AAA.
My heart's in a pickle. It's constantly fickle, and not too particular I feel when I'm not near the girl I love. I love the girl I need.
Yip was a big believer in the power of songs to change people's minds, and not only to entertain but to make them think. And I suppose you could say that's true of Finian's Rainbow as a whole, that it's very entertaining and it makes you think, and it was his most successful musical, of course.
It's an interesting point you make, that he's playing with the forms, and yet though the songs still, standards, they sound to us, our ears, as if, you know, you could have heard them on the radio, big popular hits, and yet underneath it all, this complexity is going on.
It's an effort to get the hook heard as often as possible. Or if he doesn't use the actual hook, then he'll do a parallel structure. If I'm not near the girl I love the girl I'm near. If I'm not facing the
face that I fancy,
fancy the face I face. So you're waiting for him to come back to love the girl I near, because he said it's a big setup, and it's basically the same thought over and over and over, and thus the play can be as political and as crazy as it wants, because every time a song comes along, you relax into it, you're home again, and then then the book writer can take it off onto a new tangent. The songs are the anchor. It's a little bit like a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. The songs serve as almost resting points, where you can bring home a point. They're not advancing the action in Finian as much as they do in other shows of his.
But there are political songs.
There are.
Necessity is a political song, and Idle Poor Idle Rich has commentary in it. So
Yeah.
I think it's all part and parcel of the
He's a
same
bit like
thing.
sort of Michael Moore. I mean, you know, the hard left viewpoint
Yes.
delivered in an extremely entertaining, affable way.
Well, I'm not sure how hard left it really is. I think he was certainly very liberal, and he did get blacklisted.
Well, you call him hard left, but that he was championing, going back to Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime, the fact that people were going
He was
hungry
championing
and nobody was helping them. Yeah.
Well, we've got to wrap it up. We
Absolutely.
should very quickly say, I mean, one of the keys to understanding him, though, is he grew up very, very poor. He knew.
He did.
He knew what poverty was.
No, and he felt, but I mean, Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime is magnificent, because in catchy language, it deals with people in the state of planned obsolescence. The system uses them up. Once the railroad is done, once the tower is built and done, what do you do with the guy who built it?
And that was the anthem of the Depression.
That's right, and he personalizes it by saying, hey, I was the guy with the drum when I went and fought for you.
Right.
And it's so personal.
Yeah, amazing. All right, well, you can hear the lyrics of Yip Harburg, and we should say the music of Burton Lane, a composer that I always thought was terrific, and it was always terrible. I thought that Burton Lane never wrote more musicals. Finian's Rainbow is at the St. James with a new book by Arthur Perlman. Thank you for your insights tonight, Arthur. And our friend Michael Korie, who's got Finding Neverland coming up, the musical about J.M. Barrie. Thanks for coming on.
And I should say, Michael, that they should have thanked you at the Emmy Awards for those wonderful plot points that you dreamed up for Grey Gardens that they adapted in the TV movie so wonderfully and won a lot of awards. But
No
kudos
comments.
to you.
What would you say to the comment that this show is dated, and the reason it hasn't been done for all these years is that it's sort of socially old-fashioned?
I was laboring under that suspicion too when I first heard they were doing it, and then I thought, well, you know what? This is the time of Obama, and oddly enough, my character is a person who experiences being white and being black. And our president is a person whose parents are white and black, African and black. And how relevant is that? You know what I mean? And this character goes through a journey where he finally says, you know, I see both sides. And here we have a wonderful leader who sees both sides. So I can't imagine how more relevant it could be.
This show is incredibly current, and that's what the kind of surprise that we've all found. We're like, wow. I mean, I have this big speech at the end of Act 1 about, listen, everybody's discovering credit for the first time, and considering obviously the credit crisis we're all in, it's incredibly speaks to what we're doing right now and what we're all dealing with. Racism, absolutely.
I would say that it's maybe dated in the best way, because the things that we talk about in the show are still relevant right now. Immigration, racism, and a credit crunch. We have all three things that are happening in the United States right now. So maybe it was ahead of his time when it was written in 1947, but we have a man who learns the error of his ways and becomes a better man by turning into a black man.
It was a 1940s attempt at exploring race and finance, and as we see in a lot of crazy art that has, you know, emerged over the years. Things that seem dated suddenly, sporadically, seem so right now, in many different forms. And this show is bizarrely really topical right now. I think it's serendipitous that this moment has arrived and Finian's Rainbow is here when we have a black president and we have financial issues abound, and it's ultimately a show about, you know, hope.
It's a period piece that is saying everything today. What was said in 1947 is true today. So who could say that it's dated?
This is